Welcome to the Global Roundtable organized by the Global Foundation for Democracy and Development. Today we have the pleasure of the company of Mrs. Christine Hart. She's the Manager for Policy and Government Affairs at Women Thrive Worldwide. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you with us. And before we start talking about the gender issues, I'd like to introduce you to our audiences. So, Christine has a very impressive and diverse background as a gender integration in development and gender-based violence expert. Her passion for global women's issues took root when she first served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the area of girls' education and empowerment in rural Burkina Faso. Upon returning from her Peace Corps service, Chrissy joined the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights. Her experience working with grassroots human rights defenders at RFK Center drove her to pursue graduate studies in the field of international human rights, with concentrations in human trafficking and contemporary slavery and international human rights law. As a graduate student, she served as Associate Director of the University of Denver's Human Trafficking Clinic and conducted field research on human trafficking in the Philippines and on the issues facing youth in post-conflict northern Uganda. Chrissy finally joined Women Thrive Worldwide in December 2012. As Manager of Policy and Government Affairs, she provides support across all the organization portfolios, including girls' education, economic opportunity, food security, foreign assistance reform, and gender-based violence. So to start our conversation, Chrissy, tell us a little bit, how did this passion for gender issues develop? What does it mean to you? How has it evolved?
Sure, Natasha, that's a great question. As you mentioned, my Peace Corps experience really was the impetus for engaging in these issues more deeply. Living in a place like Burkina Faso, where life can be very challenging for women and girls, was really illuminating for me, and it put into perspective, I think, a lot of the privileges and opportunities that I've had.
How long were you in Burkina Faso?
I was there for 2.5 years, just a little bit shy.
That's enough time to really get the full experience.
Right, absolutely. And what I saw working with girls, school-age girls at the primary level, was that it was interesting. There were just as many girls enrolled in school as boys, but I really, the more I engaged with these girls, the more I saw that there were all of these mitigating factors in their lives that really complicated their effort to seek a basic primary education and then move forward through the secondary system. And for me, it was just a really profound experience, and it spurred me on to engage in these issues more deeply. As I went on to graduate school and started studying human trafficking and contemporary slavery, I started thinking deeply about the root causes of trafficking in persons, and it's such a hot topic right now, but I think we often miss the mark in not talking about what root factors, from the lack of educational opportunities, the lack of access to livelihoods, make women and girls more vulnerable to things like sex and labor trafficking.
Yeah. And then you also worked in Philippines and Uganda. So you have a very broad international experience, and you've also dedicated a part of your work to the United States and United States diplomatic efforts worldwide. How has that been to see gender issues all across the world? How has it been different, and how has it been similar in a way?
That's a great question. I think the more you travel, the more striking it is how much is similar across cultures and contexts. For me, being able to relate more deeply to women in other parts of the world, I guess, made me realize how our interconnectedness really necessitates that we are aware of things like global gender issues, and that we work in a collaborative way to advance the status of women, not just at home but around the world, understanding that it benefits us all in so many ways, from generating greater global stability to, economic growth that has ripple effects that impact us all positively.
So we often say that a woman is actually at the center of socioeconomic and democratic development. It's something often quoted, and when we look at the 8 Millennium Development Goals, all of them in a way involve women, and all of them consider women at the center. From your experience, how could you explain why is a woman and gender equality really at the center of any development?
Sure. I think that's a great question with both a complicated answer and a very simple one.
It could be a very long answer.
It could be a very long answer. But I think, simply speaking, when we look at policies around development and economic growth over the last decades, we understand that women have not been considered to the same degree as men, and that their unique experiences and needs have not been addressed in a unique way. I think it's very simple, and it's problematic that, unfortunately, gender has not been at the top of the agenda, as people in the halls of power, oftentimes men, have shaped policies that affect women without really understanding their concrete realities and experiences. So I think it's a very simple answer. I think when we start to approach any project, any policy with a gendered lens, our outcomes are destined to be better when we're addressing the specific needs of different populations, especially men and women and girls and boys.
Yeah, because I was just looking like at MDGs, and then when we say eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, the woman is at the center as the one who takes care of the family and how they eat and how they live, and takes care of the resources. When you look at the universal primary education, an educated woman will probably fight for an education of her children.
Absolutely.
When you look at gender equality, that's obvious, that's number 3. When you look at the child mortality, number 4, it's more than obvious. When you look at number 5, to improve maternal health, that's clear. Number 6, to combat HIV and AIDS, malaria and other diseases, we know that a woman as a mother, as a spouse, as a family pillar, is the one who will promote the education and the care. Environmental sustainability, we are talking about agriculture, we are talking about how the family relates to the environment. And number 8 is something that's a global partnership for development, which involves women on another level. So it's really interesting that nothing in this world can be done without a woman at the center. And as a quote says, women are half of the population and the mother of the other half.
Right,
So
absolutely.
it's just unbelievable how it has been left out and really not acknowledged until pretty recently. Do you believe, then talking about the MDGs, do you believe that there has been some progress in that sense? Could we celebrate something, or where do we stand?
Sure, I think there has been some progress. I think especially we've seen it in the area of education and the increasing parity between the number of girls and boys enrolled in school around the world. I think where that parity falls off is looking at outcomes, and that's really what this next round of Millennium Development Goals needs to focus on, is not just providing access, but what we see in terms of outcomes, learning objectives met, and then how that impacts livelihoods moving forward. So taking a more holistic look at how development plays out and how we really ensure that women and girls are benefiting equally from things like educational opportunities or opportunities to pursue economic livelihoods.
But there is still a lot to be done, because from what we've seen in the research, the maternal health is the goal that is lagging behind much more than any other goals over the world. So there is a lot to work on.
Absolutely. There's a much longer way to go. And I know one thing that I've thought about specifically is that the first round of Millennium Development Goals, for me, it didn't capture gender inequality and the steps necessary to move toward further advancement of the status of women and girls in a holistic way. And I've been very pleased looking at the outcome documents, you know, from the different entities engaging in this next round of Millennium Development Goals, to see how there seems to be a better rounded out, more holistic picture of how we attack gender inequality and really how we advance the status of men and women, girls and boys equally in a more effective way.
So you think it's better streamed through the rest of the goals? Is it?
I think the two outcome goals or the two outcome documents that we've seen produced by the high-level panel and then the open working group on the sustainable
Which
development
has concluded
goals.
the meetings just recently.
Right.
Yes, so.
I think both of those documents paint a much more holistic picture of gender. So I'm confident that in the second round of the post-2015 Millennium Development Goals, we're going to see a better approach to attacking gender inequality head on and really ensuring that development is inclusive, whether that means addressing men and women equally or understanding that there are other layers, other identity factors that often render women even more vulnerable, women with disabilities, indigenous women. And so I'm excited to see what this outcome for the post-2015 agenda looks like.
So you yourself and your colleagues at Women Thrive Worldwide, you have been following closely the work on SDGs and you have been participating. Could you tell us a little bit how do you, as a non-governmental institution affiliated to the United Nations, participate, and how do you feel you can make the best contribution in that sense?
Sure, that's a great question. In terms of our work in the education space, we've really rallied the participation of a host of just phenomenal grassroots actors. We have a network of over 100 grassroots partners in about 32 countries around the world, and so we've really leveraged their concrete experience and input in helping to shape some documents and some recommendations that we've submitted to entities like the high-level panel, understanding that these local actors are really the best place to articulate their agenda and their desired outcomes from this next round of development goals.
What else do you do at Women Thrive Worldwide? I know that your agenda is very wide, and
Sure.
I know that you particularly specialize in what the U.S. is doing through its diplomatic resources and international development mechanisms worldwide. Could you
Absolutely.
comment a little bit on that part of the work and what improvement has been made?
Sure. So Women Thrive was founded in 1998, and really we were founded because it was obvious that gender and the issue of integrating gender into international development efforts, specifically those carried out by the United States, just wasn't being represented in a very effective way. And we saw a real need to up our game, so to speak, in terms of U.S. government interventions around the world to ensure that the status of women and girls was being addressed adequately and that gender equality was really a priority. So our focus has shifted over the years as we've seen, trends come and go, and it's become obvious that certain areas really require our specific engagement. So today we focus on three main areas. We look at quality education, which of course concerns both boys and girls, understanding that outcomes for girls often lag behind those for boys. We've just launched a new portfolio on women's economic empowerment that really focuses on the bottom quintile of the economic pyramid, understanding that we need to focus on that bottom 20%, so to speak, women living in extreme poverty, knowing that once we're equipping them with the tools that they need to seek livelihoods, that is just, it's such a key to sustainable economic growth, and that then leads to opportunities for greater political participation and so positive social change. And the last area in which Women Thrive intervenes is really this issue of global gender-based violence, understanding that 1 in 3 women worldwide experiences some form of physical or sexual violence in her lifetime, be it in the United States or Canada or East Timor or Bangladesh or Peru. And so we look specifically at the way U.S. government engagement attacks this issue of gender-based violence, how we integrate gender-based violence prevention and response into diverse programming from, for instance, the way our Department of Defense works with foreign militaries or trains peacekeepers, to a food security program in Ethiopia to ensure that while we're undertaking these programs in partnership with governments and communities, we're looking at how the vulnerability of women and girls is impacted, whether they're more susceptible to violence, or how we can generate empowerment in a socially appropriate way that equips them to live a life free of violence.
So recently, it was in the month of June, there was a very big summit on preventing sexual violence in conflict zones, organized by the United Nations, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Great Britain, and also supported by Angelina Jolie as the ambassador of the United Nations. So I'm sure that your organization has participated. We have done a side event in the Dominican Republic with the
Great.
participation of representatives from all around Latin America and the Caribbean. And it really did spark a lot of attention. And I would like to know, what do you think of the event? How did it go? And are we going to see any positive outcomes and better attitudes?
Great. I was very excited about the summit to begin with. I think highlighting this issue of violence and conflict on the global stage is so important, raising awareness around it, and also generating some concrete commitments on the part of governments and other entities that are engaging in humanitarian response and engaging in conflict zones. So I was happy just to see the diversity of actors that came to the table, and I think in a special focus in the dialogue on how we empower local actors and grassroots organizations that are on the ground working in a context already, be it in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, all conflict zones all around the world, or situations that require some type of humanitarian response. So the protocol that was announced at the summit impacts the way that a host of actors who are intervening in conflict settings are investigating and collecting evidence related to cases of sexual violence to ensure that these cases can be prosecuted with more efficacy. And one thing that really thrilled me was seeing donor governments and other entities, such as foundations and international organizations, make concrete commitments, many of them financial, to supporting mechanisms that really look toward building the capacity and efficacy of local actors. And one great example of that is the United Nations Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, which is a system-wide voluntary trust fund that provides grants, millions of dollars of grants every year to local actors around the world, many of whom who are operating in conflict settings, ensuring that they have the resources and capacity to engage in what we know to be some of the most effective ways to mitigate, prevent, and respond to gender-based violence in conflict.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. It was really a pleasure to talk to you. I wish you a lot of success to your wonderful organization, and we are looking forward to collaborating with you.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Thank you for watching the Global Roundtable organized by the Global Foundation for Democracy and Development. Today we have talked to Christine Hart, Manager for Government Affairs and Policy at Women Thrive Worldwide.